have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Hi, welcome to Gay USA. I'm Ann Northrup.
And I am Chris Cooper, the other gay Cooper in television news.
And star of the new HBO documentary, Birders.
Birders, the Central Park Effect. I'm not the star. I'm one of 7 people in it because I'm a Central Park birder, which is why you will never see me guest host on the show in the month of May because I'm way too busy in the park looking at birds. So, yeah.
Well, I've seen it and it's excellent and it's available on demand on HBO. So if you want to see Chris Cooper bird watching, please. It's wonderful to see him in that context. And I have a couple of housekeeping details before we get to the headlines and the news. Free Speech TV, which distributes us nationally, has a little change in its schedule next week, so we will be seen around the country at the following Eastern time. Make adjustments for your time zone. Friday at 8, Saturday at 11 p.m., both of those, and Monday at 9 a.m. So you can check the schedule at freespeech.org, but just look for a little change in the schedule next weekend only. And finally, and the podcast. We were switching web servers in the last couple of weeks, and we had a little downtime with the podcast, but we are now back up both on our website and on iTunes. So if you are a regular podcast listener of this show and have lost us in the changeover, go to iTunes or go to our website at gayusatv.org, and you will find our podcast and can resubscribe if you've lost it. Or tell your friends.
And one more housekeeping note, because we didn't mention it. Andy is out this week, but we'll be back next week. So
exactly.
In the role of Andy today.
And also next week we will have with us a candidate for U.S. Congress, Mark Takano, who would be the first out gay person of color in the U.S. Congress if he is elected in his California district, Japanese American. So we look forward to talking to Mark next week. Now, in this week's news, of course, the major headline as we record on Tuesday is the death of Sally Ride and the fact that we are all discovering for the first time that, in fact, she had a 27-year relationship with a woman, and that the mainstream media is having a little trouble wrapping its head around this.
Bad news in that there have been several really vicious assaults on lesbians and gay men in the past 2 weeks, so we'll talk about those.
And of course, the Boy Scouts of America decided to continue its assault on gay boys and men, and we'll give you the latest on that.
There's a new online campaign that reveals the real Mitt Romney called Mitt Gets Worse.
Yeah, we're going to show you a video from that is quite stunning about who he really is. And of course, there's a huge blow-up currently over Chick-fil-A's anti-gay values, and those Christians are lying to you, and we can't wait to tell you about that.
This is news to me. In international news, the Chinese dictionary now omits the definition of gay, and we'll have to fill me in on that as well.
They're being very dicey about that. You are seeing everywhere AIDS news this week because the International AIDS Conference is on in Washington, D.C. There is scientific news, there are protests, there are celebrity appearances. We'll tell you all about all of that.
The FDA has approved Truvada for HIV prevention. This is a new indication for an already approved drug, so we'll tell you how that's supposed to work.
And the controversies around it. And the Olympics are opening in London this weekend, and there is now a public list of 20 Olympic participants who are lesbian or gay or bisexual, and there is a Pride House in London.
And there's a new Pet Shop Boys video. I'm not huge on the Pet Shop Boys, but I know some people are. And the video...
That's you, Bill Baldwin, associate producer.
And the video features a transgender roller derby participant.
Yeah. But Sally Ride is really at the top of the news. Now, I am shocked at the extent to which people have sort of forgotten about Sally Ride, because she was such an enormous American hero, the first American woman in space. And if you're too young to remember, and I am not, I'm plenty old enough to remember, Sally Ride's journey into space could not have been more controversial and more literally earth-shattering at the time, 30 years ago. And she was just a fantastic human being and a brilliant scientist. And it turns out a great tennis player in her youth, and she encountered Billie Jean King in her youth, who told her to give up school and become a tennis player. Luckily, she paid no attention to that. But she was an amazing, groundbreaking feminist and role model, and just had to go through so much to become the first American woman in space. There were a couple of Russian women who preceded her.
What's interesting is how she continued to be that feminist leader after her fame sort of moved on. She's established a foundation that was all about getting girls and women, or young girls and young women, involved in science and math and getting them to participate. And that continued through her whole life. That was her main focus. She actually sort of dodged fame. She didn't want a TV movie made about her. She didn't do her memoirs because she was a very private person, which is why I think so much of this, from the fact that she died at the age of 61, very young, of pancreatic cancer, and the fact that she was a lesbian, caught so many people by surprise, including me. I was reading the story like, oh, I got to take a break from preparing for Gay USA. I'm going to read a different story. And I got to the end of it, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
We're everywhere. But this may explain why she was so private, because it turns out she was a lesbian. She also had a lesbian sister named Bear, who was given an interview about her. But what was announced on her company's website when she died was that she had a partner of 27 years, Tam O'Shaughnessy, who was also her partner in the company. They worked together. They had known each other as children. And that's where they first met. Sally then became a physicist, became an astronaut, went up on the Challenger shuttle before it later blew up. And then Sally married briefly.
5 years, I think.
She was married 5 years, but in the middle of that, she became involved with Tam. She got divorced 2 years after she became involved with Tam. This is one of the few pictures of them together that has been published recently. That's from a speech they were giving to the American Library Association, I think. But they were together for 27 years until Sally's death. Now, she was out to her family and friends. It wasn't a secret, but she never talked about it publicly. I don't know if she was ever asked. They worked together. They wrote books together, children's science books. They ran this company together. And the debate now is, should she have been out? Was that bad for her to be closeted? Was she closeted?
All right, Ann, so I'm going to throw you this ball for you to lob back as you see fit. How is this different from Anderson Cooper?
All right. Anderson Cooper, who's about 20 years younger, lives a very voluntarily public life. He put himself on TV. He has written his memoirs. He's written about his family. He's written about his brother's suicide. He flirts publicly with everybody, and has certainly discussed gay issues ad nauseum on his various TV shows, but has never until now acknowledged that he was gay. Lived a very public gay life in New York, and then when he did come out, made rationalizations for why he hadn't earlier, about wanting to be private and wanting to be safe and keep his crew safe in dangerous international situations.
Whereas Sally Ride was private about her entire life. She basically, no one knew she had pancreatic cancer outside of her immediate circle.
She worked for NASA. She was an astronaut. This was 30 years ago. It was not as easy, and she was taking enough guff as a female astronaut to, Johnny Carson made jokes about her purse matching her shoes. Some congressman, a senator, made a joke about, oh, it's good we have a woman in space now to cook and clean for the male astronauts.
Great.
I can't begin to explain to you how tough it was for her just to be a woman in space. Now, people have been angry at me for my criticizing Anderson Cooper for being late and cowardly. I certainly think it would have been nice if Sally Ride had talked publicly about being a lesbian, and I think it would have made a difference in people's lives. But I am thrilled that she clearly was okay with being out after death. You know, her company announced her partnership with Tam. This is not something that was dragged out of a corner somewhere.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that maybe in those early years, maybe she hadn't sussed out that she was a lesbian? Maybe that's what the marriage to a male fellow astronaut was about.
I don't know whether she was trying to live a heterosexual life or was trying to cover up her lesbianism or was, I don't know. Who knows? Nobody knows. It was a brief marriage. But I don't think she was in a relationship for 27 years. She's known for a long time. But she did live a more private life than Anderson Cooper has. But she was certainly a public figure and a celebrity and a heroine. You know, I keep saying she was an American hero. She was an extremely important person. And I am thrilled to have her identified as a lesbian now. But I watched the network news reports last night when her death was first announced, as we tape on Tuesday. I watched NBC and CBS. No mention of her relationship. None, zero, nothing. No, she is survived by. No, nothing. Just completely left out of the story. The New York Times puts at the end of its huge obit, survived by her partner of 27 years, Tam O'Shaughnessy, without identifying Tam as a woman, just the name, and no discussion. Now, I would think it was a news story that Sally Ride was a lesbian. I would think there would be news to be made in discussing whether or not she could have been out at any point in her life, and the fact that she was so private, perhaps because she was a lesbian and didn't want to talk about it. But no, none of that has appeared yet as we tape.
All right, well, more
Enough of that.
Okay, one addendum while we're talking about memorials to gays in space. I just have to mention the story that put the biggest smile on my face of the whole past 2 weeks, which is that Frank Kameny, who rightly is often referred to as the Rosa Parks of the gay and lesbian civil rights movement, he was a World War II veteran, graduated from Harvard, astronomer with the federal government until they found out he was gay and they fired him. This is back in was this the late 50s or early 60s that this happened? I can't remember exactly when. But anyway, he was our pioneer, one of our pioneers in the movement.
And out.
And out. And he died back in October, this past October, but now a Canadian amateur astronomer, Gary Billings, has taken a minor planet, also known as an asteroid, minor planet 40463 in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, and named it Frank Kameny. So Frank Kameny is now up there in the stars where he belongs. The stars he used to look at as an astronomer, permanently named, has permanently with a planet named after him. And that's fantastic.
Congratulations, Frank. You deserve it. And I also want to note the passing of Willis Edwards, 66-year-old president of the NAACP's Beverly Hills Hollywood chapter, out gay, out HIV positive. Invented the NAACP's Image Awards, pressured the U.S. Post Service to do the Rosa Parks stamp. He was a beloved activist and leader in the NAACP and died much too early at age 66 in L.A.
All right, now unfortunately we got to seg over to some really brutal news. Lots of bad bashings. The first one is out of Lincoln.
Well, and I want to segue at this point to these stories because clearly Frank Kameny being out and Willis Edwards being out hasn't stopped this, but I continue to believe that the more people that are out and the more we can promote a conversation in this world about the diversity of the population, the less we will have these vicious, brutal assaults.
Yes and no. I mean, there's a certain immediate backlash that occurs with increased visibility, but, as the public gets more comfortable with us, you just got to look at the generation coming up.
But here's what's going on nonetheless.
All right, so first one is in Lincoln, Nebraska, where a lesbian had her home broken into, anti-gay graffiti spray painted on the walls of the basement, and she was bound and apparently mutilated physically, left stripped. She managed to escape. Her house was set on fire. She crawled to a neighbor for help. This has sparked a candlelight vigil of over 500 people in Omaha, Nebraska. But it's a pretty horrible story, and the details are still emerging. Apparently, to some extent, it has actually polarized the city of Lincoln. I don't know how this could polarize anybody. What's there to be polarized about?
Yeah. In Louisville, Kentucky, a lesbian teenager walking along with two teenage boy friends was assaulted by a group of adults. Homophobic slurs, punched, kicked, has a broken jaw. We have the local news report from Louisville about this attack.
Her jaw is broken in several places. She has to have a plate put in her jaw. She has her jaw wired at this point. She has teeth knocked out of her mouth. She has scrapes and bruises.
Injuries that came for no reason other than being gay.
What did she do so wrong but walk to the store and just be who she is?
Early Tuesday morning, Andy Hornback got a call. Her two boys had slipped out of the house to get some chips and a Coke at a store around the corner.
My son called me and said, "Mom, can you come meet us? We feel uncomfortable. There are 4 grown-ups following us a little too close."
The boys were with a 16-year-old girl who's like a daughter to Hornback. They say the men started yelling gay slurs toward the teen girl. Before they could give their mom the exact location, suddenly she heard her son screaming.
I can't even describe the pain. Right now I'm getting ready to cry, hearing my child scream and know that they were hurt. And they were scared, and I couldn't get there fast enough.
By the time she arrived, EMS and police were there. One of her 2 sons suffered a concussion, knocked down, trying to help the girl.
She was on the ground, blood just pouring out of her face. These grown men put her on the ground, kicked her in her stomach, kicked her in her face, and punched her in her face, and kept going until a bystander yelled stop and called 911.
And I think she was targeted for being a strong lesbian young girl.
The violence happened in front of 2 churches.
How sorry I am that this happened anywhere, but especially in front of our church family.
Family friend Brenda Hickerson is speaking for the girl and her family.
This was a hate crime. There was hate slurs thrown. This was not a robbery. They didn't take anything from them.
The boys say the woman who was in the adult group didn't attack anyone. They're hoping she or someone who knows them will go to police.
You are saying that this is right to hate, and it's just not right.
Connie Leonard, Wave 3 News.
Well, unfortunately, we got more to tell you about. In Washington, D.C., a pair of gay men were walking home, Michael Joel Hall and Michael, I may mangle the pronunciation, Michael Royke. But they were walking home Saturday night, Sunday morning. It was just after midnight, so it was Sunday morning. And they got jumped by a gang that beat in particular Royke so badly that he needed surgery. I'm sorry, they beat Hall so badly that he needed surgery. Royke was beaten a little less badly. And this is right in Washington, D.C., the 1900 block of 3rd Street in Northeast D.C. So more bad news.
Again, homophobic slurs, broken cheekbone, fractured jaw, just gratuitous attacks.
And apparently Hall has no health insurance, so his friends have set up a Facebook page to try to solicit help for him.
We told you about the Corpus Christi case of the lesbian couple who were attacked, one killed, the other severely injured and still in the hospital. But she's coming out of it a little, and she has refined the sketch of the attacker, so that's good news that they're getting a better picture of him. They haven't got him yet. And in Atlanta, we had told you about Brandon White, who was attacked some months ago. His attackers have been given sentences of 10 years in jail. There were gay activists in Atlanta who were arguing for no prison time, but Brandon said, "Excuse me, they attacked me and I want prison time." So That's what's ended up. And not quite a physical attack, but a Richmond, Kentucky lesbian couple went to a local park for picture taking. One of them is pregnant. They wanted some nice pictures of them in the park. They were kissing a little, just a little light, regular kiss, and they got thrown out of the park.
Apparently it was a private park, so they had the right to do this. But even if it wasn't private, Kentucky has, it was in Kentucky, correct?
Yes.
Yes, Kentucky has no
Richmond.
non-discrimination laws, so they were out of luck altogether.
Now, the Boy Scouts of America does not have a non-discrimination law because they went to the Supreme Court years ago and were defined as a private organization that could do what they want. But there is a lot of pressure on the Boy Scouts to change. And in anticipation of this, the current administration of the Boy Scouts last week came out with a new announcement that...
Well, they undertook a 2-year review.
No, they didn't.
They had a committee. They had a committee of 11 people.
It is a lie, it's a sham, and it won't work. That's an old phrase from ACT UP. They claim to have a 2-year review. We don't believe it. But they announced that they were keeping their no gay scouts or scout leaders policy.
Not just keeping, they affirmed it in the strongest terms, saying it is absolutely the best policy for the Boy Scouts.
Well, the reason they did this is because Jennifer Terrell, the Ohio lesbian pack leader, was showing up with 300,000 signatures at their doorstep, and Zach Walls, the terrific kid who has 2 lesbian moms and is an ex-Eagle Scout, was showing up to complain. And they have a couple of corporate CEOs on their board who have publicly stated that they don't like this policy, and one of them, the AT&T CEO,
Randall Stevenson,
is going to become the president of the organization in 2014, and he has promised to try to change the policy. So this outgoing administration is in panic mode, and that's why there was this announcement.
Okay, so I have just a few brief words for you, Mr. Stevenson, which is that would you remain on the board of a country club that was whites only?
Well, he said if he's going to become the president, maybe he can make the change, although 13% of the Boy Scouts are Mormon kids who are mandated to become members, and they do exert a lot of control. I'm willing to wait and see what he does as president. But meanwhile, this poor guy, Eric Jones, who's 19 and was a camp counselor at a Boy Scout camp, came out to his superiors and was immediately fired and sent home. This happened last week. So Eagle Scouts around the country and other Boy Scout alumni are returning their badges in protest and continuing to sign Jennifer Terrell's petitions. And there's a real movement against this, which is terrific. I think the Boy Scouts have done themselves a disservice by coming out with this announcement that they were reinforcing the policy, but I don't feel sorry for them.
Well, meanwhile, another organization with discriminatory policy, Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A.
They spell it Chick-fil-A. I always want to say Chick-fil-A.
Spell it Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. Their CEO was, it hasn't been a secret that they don't support gay rights in any way, shape, or form for a long time.
That their profits go to focus on the family and other anti-gay organizations.
Exactly, but recently their CEO was publicly caught saying that, we think it's just great about no same-sex marriage. I can't remember the exact terms that he used.
Guilty as charged.
There you go.
Said.
That was it.
Guilty as charged.
That when they said, do you really give money to only traditional family values organizations? And he said, guilty as charged. So this has caused a lot of fallout. And the latest is that Jim Henson's company is actually pulling their Muppet toys from the quote-unquote Happy Meals. That's what McDonald's calls them. They don't call them Happy Meals at Chick-fil-A, but they're equivalent of Happy Meals for kids. were going to have Jim Henson, I think they are going to have them for this summer. But after that, Jim Henson is saying, no more Muppet toys.
Well, they're also, the Henson Company is also donating, Chick-fil-A evidently pays for these toys and then hands them out to their customers. And Henson's company says they don't want to be associated with the anti-gay values of Chick-fil-A, so they're giving the Chick-fil-A payments they've gotten to GLAAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. But then there was this shocking, shameful announcement by Chick-fil-A this week that the reason the Muppet toys would no longer be available at Chick-fil-A was because of potential safety issues. Now, this is a bold-faced lie and extremely unbecoming to a company that advertises itself as portraying and embodying Christian values. I thought that was the most shocking development yet. It's one thing to assert a value system and live by it and close your stores on Sundays and stuff, but and you know, they can give money anywhere they want and we can choose not to patronize them, but to lie about why the Muppet toys are not available. So meanwhile, the mayor of Boston's very upset about Chick-fil-A. He says he doesn't want them opening stores in his town.
But former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee is going to stage a Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day in Chick-fil-A stores, I think on August 1st. I think that's the day he's picked.
That's possible. And on Friday, August 3rd, LGBT activists are staging a same-sex kiss-in day at Chick-fil-A stores. And there's one in Manhattan here at NYU.
Shockingly.
And NYU students have for years been complaining about the fact that Chick-fil-A exists on the NYU campus. So that's a good place to demonstrate on August 3rd. Okay, let's get to politics. Mitt Romney had the goal to go to the NAACP convention and say that he wants to represent everyone of every sexual orientation.
Oh my God.
But will defend traditional marriage. Well, there's a new campaign, you know about the It Gets Better campaign that Dan Savage did. To try to encourage suicidal teenagers to hang around and believe that if they hang in there, their lives will get better. Well, now there's a new campaign that's been put together by the Courage Campaign from California, which has been very active in the Prop 8 stuff and politics out there. And they're calling it Mitt Gets Worse. And in fact, they have a website, mittgetsworse.org, that you can check out, where they are starting to put up videos that are stories from people who've had actual interactions with Mitt Romney and their experiences with him on various LGBT issues. And one of them is Julie Goodridge, who was one of the plaintiffs in the original Massachusetts marriage case. And she talks about meeting with Mitt when he was governor of Massachusetts and all this marriage talk was going on. And it is an incredible story, and we're going to show it to you now.
He said he was a friend of the gay community. He tried to block our marriages. There is no doubt in my mind that if Mitt is elected president, it's going to get a lot worse. My name's Julie Goodridge, and I was half of the lead plaintiffs in the Massachusetts marriage case that brought same-sex marriage to the Commonwealth. Mitt Romney did everything he could possibly do to block our ability to get married. But I was still really hopeful, you know. In some ways, I'm sort of the eternal optimist, and I went in and I thought, you know what? If we can change the minds of all of these citizens in Massachusetts to understand why we need to be married and why our family needs to be protected, you know, we can talk to the governor. So we went in to try to talk to him, and, you know, it was truthfully the most frustrating experience that I had in the entire marriage case. And during that time, both Hillary and I had some pretty frustrating conversations, but this one took the cake. When we met with Mitt, he didn't know who we were. He didn't have time to meet with us in advance. He wouldn't schedule an appointment with us. He met with us only because he was being forced to by the media. I looked him in the eye as we were leaving the meeting, And I said, in exasperation, Governor Romney, tell me, what would you suggest I say to my 8-year-old daughter about why her mommy and her ma can't get married? Because you, the governor of her state, is going to block our marriage. And he looked at me and he said, kind of looked, sort of over my shoulder with this blank stare and said, I don't really care what you tell your adopted daughter. Why don't you just tell her what you've been telling her for the last 8 years? Our entire story was about the fact that when I gave birth to Annie, there were such severe complications that she was rushed off to neonatal intensive care. Hillary had to go with Annie, and then she couldn't get back in to see me in recovery because she wasn't my next of kin. And then when she tried to see me and wasn't allowed, she tried to get back in to see Annie, and she couldn't go in to see Annie because she wasn't seen as her real mother. This story was in every single, it was in the New York Times, it was in People magazine, it was in every single public media outlet that there was. It was on the front of Newsweek. But the governor of the state of the first gay marriage case in this country didn't feel it was necessary to read about who we were and why we wanted these rights. I have never in my life stood before someone who had no capacity for empathy like Mitt Romney. He didn't care about my daughter. He didn't care about what we should tell her. All he cared about was his political future and blocking our rights to get married. Gay marriage is a thorn in Romney's side. His goal is to make it go away. He doesn't believe that we need rights or want rights or deserve rights. I have never felt so strongly that this man cannot be the next president of the United States, because let me tell you, it gets worse, and Mitt is going to make it worse.
That is a scary story.
Well, let's put some more thorns in Mitt Romney's side.
Okay.
Today, as we tape, is the 1-year anniversary of the first gay weddings happening in New York. And today, Mayor Bloomberg and out lesbian Speaker of the City Council, Christine Quinn, announced some of the statistics that go with this. 8,200 same-sex marriage licenses have been issued in that first year. It's brought an estimated $259 million in economic impact to the city and $16 million in city revenues. So that's all great news, and I hope it sticks in Mitt Romney's craw.
He doesn't care. The whole point of her story is his lack of empathy and lack of interest in any of that. But good news from the Center for American Progress, which has been looking at tracking the polls nationally on same-sex marriage, and finds, as it aggregates those polls, that the United States does now, by a majority, support same-sex marriage, which is a stunning development in a very short period of time. A bad case in New York City, in spite of marriage, a lesbian couple living in a rent-stabilized apartment, too arcane for people to follow, but the landlord in this apartment refused to add the wife to the lease and yelled at and harassed the tenant and denied her this right, which is completely illegal, and now Lambda is having to sue to get the landlord to do the right thing, the legal thing.
The latest case against DOMA, working its way through the courts, is that of Edie Windsor, the 83-year-old lesbian whose partner, wife, Thea Spear, they got married in Canada, died, and she was hit with some enormous tax bill because the federal government, because of DOMA, didn't recognize her marriage. So her case now has been, she's won her case initially, but it's working its way up to the Supreme Court, and they've asked that the Supreme Court take it. So we'll join 2 other cases that are already working up their way, one from Massachusetts, the other from California, the Galinsky case.
Yeah,
which all challenge DOMA on the basis of Section 3 and equal protection.
Edie's lawyers are asking, she won at the district court level. It should next go to the District Court of Appeals, but her lawyers are asking the Supreme Court to bypass the Court of Appeals, as the Department of Justice is asking in the Galinsky case, and take the court directly because they have all these cases accumulating, and
all on the same basis, all challenging basically equal protection.
It's all about DOMA Section 3 and federal benefits, but there are various interpretations of why it should be declared unconstitutional, having to do with the level of scrutiny and equal protection or due process. There are many ways to attack it, but they're trying to get all the cases together no matter what level they're at right now. And they're also making the point that Edie is 83 and has a bad heart, although I saw her this weekend and she looked pretty lively. The Attorney General of Massachusetts, Martha Coakley, has also asked the Supreme Court to take the case from the state of Massachusetts, and their argument is that Massachusetts should have the right to define marriage itself, and that the federal government should honor that and not have a two-tiered system. And should, if Massachusetts declares same-sex couples married, the federal government should honor that in its benefits.
Now, it's important to remember that...
By the way, Sally Ride's surviving partner will get no spousal benefits.
It's important to remember that even if the Supreme Court takes this case and decides in our favor, it doesn't do anything to establish any sort of national same-sex marriage. It simply means that those states that do have same-sex marriage will get federal recognition.
Right, exactly. Meanwhile, the Office of Personnel Management in the Obama administration is trying to sort of nibble around the edges and provide benefits where they can. And they've issued a proposed new rule that would allow health coverage for the kids of federal employees with domestic partners. So even if they're not recognized by the federal government as having a legal relationship, the kids could be recognized, and a number of other benefits to federal employees.
But those domestic partners of the federal employees still cannot get any sort of, because of DOMA, still cannot get any sort of benefits.
Well, they can't get Social Security payments or survivor benefits, but there are various benefits they're trying to work them into getting. Edwin Leslie, out gay appointee by Governor Jan Brewer of Arizona to the Tourism Advisory Council, has quit because the state is trying to get the Supreme Court to overturn a lower court ruling that upheld domestic partner benefits for state employees. And Edwin Leslie says, hey, Arizona, you can't screw our tourism by trying to take away these benefits for same-sex couples.
The estimate is that it's going to cost them millions in tourism if Governor Jan Brewer continues to pursue this.
And mixed signals from Target, which is selling same-sex wedding greeting cards, but is not selling Frank Ocean's new album, Channel Orange, which includes references to his same-sex lover.
Well, Target is saying that they're not selling it because of an exclusive 2-week window that iTunes had to sell it before they did. Which,
heaven forbid.
That kind of corporate stuff they do all the time, so I wouldn't read too much into that.
Yeah, and the Episcopalians have released the text of their lifelong covenant that they've written for same-sex unions, which is lovely. And I heard from an Episcopal priest who's very happy about it, but I would like full marriage equality in the Episcopal Church.
Meanwhile, the chair of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, expects that marriage will be part of the national platform. On the flip side of the aisle, the House Majority Leader, Eric Cantor, Republican, is making some noises about how we have to be more open and tolerant.
Ridiculous.
Without actually doing anything that way.
Well, it's not like he's going to change the Republican platform or policies on LGBT issues. He's just trying to get more votes.
Oh, and what's astonishing is how the right wing went after him for even just saying that little bit. The extreme right wing.
Well, the extreme right wing in California has failed to get enough signatures to put a referendum on the ballot in November to repeal the LGBT history teaching mandate. So we don't even have to vote on it in California. The mandate exists and presumably will go into effect.
And apparently,
And they can teach about Sally Ride.
And apparently, the House Republicans have not gotten the memo from Eric Cantor because they scheduled a vote to ban gay marriages on military bases. So
It would never get through. They passed it, but it's not going to get through the Senate. In Long Beach, California, the city council has elected out gay Robert Garcia as its vice mayor. Congratulations to him. In San Diego, they held the Pride March, and several hundred members of the military marched in uniform after getting the Defense Department to okay that. The local commanders were saying, oh, each person has to get permission from their commander, blah, blah, blah. Some were saying yes, some were saying no, and people were getting upset, and the Defense Department said, never mind, you can all march in uniform, one time only. They march in uniform in the St. Patrick's Day parade and other parades all over the country. Why not this?
in any case, it was a historic moment for that to happen because it never happened before. So let's note that.
San Diego also raised its giant rainbow flag, then lowered it to half-mast to acknowledge the horrible, horrible massacre in Aurora, Colorado at the movie theater. And in the Pride Parade, one of the people marching is this gay Republican mayoral candidate who is in league with all the right-wing Republicans, including the people who backed Proposition 8 to outlaw marriage. And he got booed, I'm happy to say.
Well, he stated outright, he said, I'm never going to do anything about any gay issues. It's like, great, what do we need you for?
This Sunday from 12 to 4 in Chicago at Union Park will be the first transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex freedom event, day, performances, speak out, games, picnic, 20 groups coming together to stage this event. Should be lots of fun. That's Sunday, 12 to 4 in Union Park.
Shifting to politics a little bit, are you
I think we've been doing politics, but go ahead.
Well, I want to talk about I know, and we still have all that AIDS news to cover. Lesbian Super PAC has been formed by Laura Ricketts, including Jane Lynch and Billie Jean King. They're going to try to raise as much money as possible for causes that are important, or for candidates who support causes that are important to lesbians.
It's called LPAC, and if you want to get information about this and who they're supporting and what, you can go to teamlpac.com. Irva Shivad is involved in this too, and Emily Giske, who's a big political operative here. LPAC, teamlpac.com. And Kevin Jennings is the new executive director of the Arcus Foundation.
Go, Kevin.
GLSEN founder and former education department.
And classmate of mine.
Yeah. And we're amused by the Lieutenant Governor of Florida, Jennifer Carroll, who was supposedly caught in a sex act with a female subordinate in her office by a disgruntled employee. She's denying it.
And says, so usually black women that look like me don't engage in relationships like that. Jennifer Carroll, I got news for you.
We think you protest too much.
And black women who think like you may have sex with other women, but you don't have lesbian relationships because no lesbian would put up with you that long.
Well, that's a longer discussion we don't have time for today. Let's move on to international news. Okay, so the Chinese dictionary thing is that they put out a new Chinese dictionary, and under the term tongji, which means comrade, that has become a term in China meaning gay. As gay is a term that has come to mean homosexual, even though some people still resent that. But in the Chinese dictionary, under tongji, it doesn't say gay, it only says comrade, and they're refusing to acknowledge that. You know why? They don't want to encourage that usage. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, a bunch of gay men, including some Gay USA viewers, were on a cruise, RSVP cruise, that was scheduled to make a port of call in Casablanca, Morocco. They didn't. There's confusion as to why, but it seems at first there was a statement that they were denied by local authorities the right to dock, but actually it seems like what really happened is there was some concern about safety on shore, and no one could kind of guarantee the safety of the guests if they went ashore. So the RSVP Cruises and Holland America Lines themselves decided not to make that port of call.
Paul Bowles is spinning in his grave at the idea that any gay people would be refused entry to Morocco, which is evidently a fairly gay place. But the difference is public and private.
Right.
And when you're overt and out, then suddenly it becomes a problem. And it's a problem in St. Petersburg, Russia, where they announced that 73 people have been prosecuted in the last 4 months since they passed this no homosexual propaganda in public law.
And homophobic sentiment is echoed similarly in neighboring Ukraine, but in nearby Serbia, apparently, it's become a little bit of a hub for transsexual surgery. Nearly 100 foreigners and Serbs have undergone sexual reassignment surgery in the past year, and the numbers are growing in that country.
Interesting. A bed and breakfast in Grand Forks, British Columbia, has been fined $5,000 for rejecting a gay male couple as guests. So they said, well, we have to stick up for our religious values. And the government said, hey, you can have all the values you want, but you're a commercial establishment and you must just, follow the non-discrimination laws.
Meanwhile, in India, the Indian government has bought the letters of Gandhi to Hermann Kallenbach, a German Jewish architect who, in some reports, was linked to Gandhi in perhaps a romantic way. There's a lot of controversy over
They're
that.
love letters.
Well,
There are 1,000 of them.
A lot of Indians found this unthinkable, that this might be the case, and so now India has stepped in when these letters were between the two were about to go on auction, and they have paid $1.3 million to buy those letters, thus taking them off the market.
The sad case in England where a 16-year-old transgender girl was told to change to boys' clothes to take an exam at school. So she walks into the principal's office waving the Equality Act of 2010, which includes a gender non-discrimination clause, and said, hey, you can't do that to me. And they told her, all right, you can take the exam wearing women's clothes, but you have to sit in the hall. Now, she's been wearing girls' clothes to school for years. But not taking an exam. The Netherlands has announced it will grant asylum to all gay and transgender Iraqis, which is great
This is a
news.
turnaround, because they originally were not going to do that. Meanwhile, more good news from Latin America, which seems to be generating a lot of good news for us these days. In Chile, the president has signed an anti-discrimination bill into law, and this was largely motivated by the murder of Daniel Zamudio, who was murdered in a vicious hate crime, beaten to death, and swastikas carved onto his body. So at least something good has come out of that in terms of this new hate crimes law.
I think we better get to AIDS news.
I think so.
Actually, before we get to the AIDS conference, we should chronologically report that the FDA did approve Truvada, you say potato, I say potato, for HIV pre-exposure prophylaxis. Now, here's the deal. If you are HIV negative and you want to remain so, and you are at high risk, if you are, say, a sex worker, or you are someone with multiple partners of unknown HIV status, or you are in a serodiscordant couple, one of you is HIV positive, one of you is HIV negative, and you are sexually active, this pill is supposed to increase your chances of remaining negative.
I think by 60%, or am I
It depends.
getting that wrong?
It depends on whether you take it every day as you are supposed to. You are because it is not a perfect protection. The recommendation is to keep using condoms and practice safer sex, and you must stay adherent to the regimen. This pill also has side effects.
Well, that's one of the two big problems. One is apparently it seems to be pretty rough on the liver. And then number 2 is the cost. It's tremendously expensive.
$12,000 a year. And you must be tested regularly because if you do become HIV positive, you cannot take this drug alone. It will promote viral resistance. So there are a lot of questions about this. Now, it can be very helpful in some high-risk situations, but the AIDS Healthcare Foundation in California calls this a reckless decision to approve this. So if you're, and it certainly offers no protection from other STDs, so if you're considering this, please get a lot of information before you take it.
Big news from the Obama administration. It is a political move, but who cares? It's great news. They have decided to provide $80 million in grants, which will allow everyone to come off the ADAP waiting lists in all the states around the country. That is fantastic news. And yes, some of this money is coming from Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
So, this is great that this is happening.
And expand care to about 14,000 more. But of course, the big news this week is the AIDS conference, the International AIDS Conference taking place in D.C. You can get all the information you want about it by going to the conference website, AIDS2012.org. AIDS2012.org. You will find all the information about all the presentations and everything. Now, there are protests throughout the conference about the exclusion of sex workers and intravenous drug users from entry into the United States and therefore exclusion from the conference. There have been protests about that. HRC held a pre-conference panel on stigma. Big report came out in conjunction with this about the rise in HIV infection among black gay men, and you can get that report by going to blackaids.org.
It is startling, some of the things in there. We don't really have time to go through it. But
criminalization is also a big subject at the conference. President Obama did not speak as we taped this to the conference, but provided a videotape. There's some concern about that, but there was a White House reception for the conference. And
Hillary Clinton spoke at the conference.
Hillary Clinton spoke. HHS Secretary Sebelius spoke.
Hillary Clinton made a big push for male circumcision, particularly in African countries.
Housing Works held a couple of big demonstrations. Clean Needles Will End AIDS. They got some people arrested. There was a big Keep the Promise march and rally with everyone from Al Sharpton to Cornel West to Wyclef Jean to Margaret Cho. So a ton going on. And again, AIDS2012.org is the place to get all the official conference information. Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch put out a big report blasting the cops for arresting sex workers with condoms. You want people to use condoms, and then you arrest them if they have them on the grounds that means they're automatically sex workers. Crazy country. And interesting news from the University of Washington, where researchers have isolated a protein in HIV that they think is one thing that prevents the immune system from killing HIV. This is very preliminary information, but if they pursue this course, it could be a way to attack HIV in a different way and really disable it as opposed to letting it thrive on the immune system.
Years away from any sort of actual clinical test.
Of course, all these things are. The NAACP convention released a report, The Black Church in HIV, The Social Justice Imperative. It's a 66-page manual for churches. Drug resistance growing in parts of Africa for antiretroviral treatment because people can't or won't take the drugs regularly. Sometimes places run out and they don't have them. And a report that a 4-drug pill is testing better than a 3-drug pill.
Shall we give the gay guide to the Olympics extremely quickly?
Okay, go.
Very simply, there are 20 openly gay and lesbian athletes, almost all of them lesbian, only 3 of them men, at the London Olympics.
One of the men is Matthew Mitchum, the diver who won the gold medal last time.
From Australia. And then there's a couple from the U.S., Simone Augustus in basketball, and Lisa Raymond from doubles tennis.
You can get the full list of lesbian, gay, and bisexual, we don't know of any transgender, Olympians at BuzzFeed.com or GayGames.org. Gay Games is also running a Pride House in the first week of August there. And Caster Semenya, who was challenged as a female participant, and really run through the ringer for her gender identity, is carrying South Africa's flag at the opening ceremony, which really is a wonderful, stunning thing. We are running out of the time. Let's see. Durham, North Carolina has a great gay and lesbian and transgender film festival coming up in August.
Cyndi Lauper is hosting an online celebrity auction to benefit her True Colors Foundation.
Elton John has a new book about his lack of action in the AIDS epidemic early on. The Pet Shop Boys, we're not going to have time to show it to you, but they have a new video for a song called Winner. You can look it up on YouTube, and it's the video is all about the London Roller Girls roller derby team and their transgender member, Dirty Diana. And the video shows her transitioning from male to female to participate as a roller girl. And there's a rapper called Murs, M-U-R-S, who has a new video called Animal Style, and it's about, he plays a guy who is having a relationship with another guy in high school, but he doesn't want to be out about it, and the other guy does, and it's all about them negotiating this, and ends up in tragedy and murder and suicide. But Muir's Animal Style is interesting. Also, at the Olympics, there's a film team following Greg Louganis around that is making a big documentary about him that should be out next year.
And also talks about his return to diving, or his attempt to return to diving, apparently. So.
Maybe. He's coaching the divers at the on the U.S. Olympic team. And Allstate Insurance has a new bus stop ad in San Francisco. That's this very elegant guy in drag, and the headline is, "I dress in drag, but I don't race my engine." All right. Well, Andy will be back next week. And Chris Cooper, star of the HBO documentary Birders. What's the subtitle?
Birders, the Central Park Effect. It's about Central Park birders and the birds there. And the guy got some amazing photos of birds, and all the photos of the birds, all the video of the birds is from Central Park. So.
And in case you're still confused, birders are bird watchers, and that is when Chris is not here or at his regular job, he likes to do bird watching in Central Park. Free Speech is doing a little switch in its schedule just next weekend, so check out freespeech.org for the schedule. The show will air Friday night, Saturday night, and Monday morning. Friday night, 8 Eastern, Saturday night, 11 Eastern, Monday morning, I think 9 a.m. Eastern. And the podcast, if you were a podcast subscriber and it somehow disappeared, go to iTunes and resubscribe, or go to our website at gayusatv.org to find episodes of the podcast. Mark Takano, congressional candidate next week, and Andy will be back, and we will see you then. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.